You may have heard people talking about how you need to accept anxiety. They'll say that you need to accept anxiety in order to desensitize your nervous system and fully recover. But the unfortunate reality is that acceptance doesn't actually work for a lot of people. So today, I'm going to talk about what acceptance is, why it has a tendency to not work, and then I'm going to give you the right approach to your anxiety. Let's get started. Hey friend, Peter Wessels here with Fearless Anxiety. Before we jump in, I want to make sure you're on the recovery path. So I put a complete framework to recovery in the link below. It's called the 5-Step Cure to Anxiety and Panic Attacks, and it's completely free. It'll break down the steps that you must take in order to recover from anxiety and get back to feeling normal again. All right, by the time my clients get to me, they've been struggling with anxiety for some time, and they're typically frustrated because they feel like they're not making any progress in their recovery. Not only that, but oftentimes they feel like they're going in the opposite direction of recovery. In other words, their anxiety is getting worse instead of getting better. This was my exact experience when I was suffering from anxiety. I was trying everything that I could to get better, but my symptoms weren't improving. In fact, I was getting farther and farther away from recovery because my anxiety, my panic attacks, my derealization, heart palpitations, and all other symptoms just kept getting worse. What I didn't know at the time, though, was that I was responding to my anxiety in the wrong way. Not only that, but I didn't realize that the way I was responding to my anxiety was actually making my anxiety worse. First, let's break down how I and you respond to anxiety. Okay, so what happens is when we start to feel our anxiety coming on, our immediate response is to tense up. What I mean is that our muscles tighten and we sort of brace ourselves for the oncoming wave of anxiety. This is what I was doing, it's what you're doing, and it's what everyone does who experiences severe anxiety. It is simply an instinctive reaction to the sensation of anxiety, and we call it resistance. You are resisting and trying to protect yourself from anxiety. Now, this instinctive reaction to try to tense up and protect yourself is not actually unique to anxiety. We actually have this same reaction in other situations too. For example, think back to a time when you jumped into cold water. When you jumped into that cold water, like a pool or a lake, you have nearly the same reaction as you do when you experience anxiety. Remember how when you felt that ice cold water, you instantly clenched up and tightened every muscle in your body? Well, you did that instinctively because your brain interpreted the cold water as harmful. And so your body flexed and tensed up to try to protect you. Now, this is the same signal your brain sends when you experience anxiety. Your brain is trying to protect you because you interpret the sensations of anxiety as harmful. Okay, so let's break down why this response is the wrong response to anxiety. I think the first question we need to ask is whether anxiety is actually harmful. Because if anxiety isn't actually harmful, then you don't need to resist and try to protect yourself from it. All right, let's break down what anxiety is. Anxiety and all its strange and intense sensations are caused by one thing, your fight or flight response. Your fight or flight response is a protective response that engages when you're in danger, and it helps to allow you to fight the threat or to flee to safety. Historically, this survival response has been a critical part of how we've survived as a species. For instance, if our ancient ancestors spotted a lion or a tiger, their fight or flight response would flood their bodies with adrenaline and stress hormones, and that allowed them to spring into action. This response was incredibly helpful, and it still is today when we find ourselves in physical danger. But when you're suffering from anxiety, what has happened is your fight or flight response has started to malfunction. It's triggering when there's no actual danger around. As this begins to happen on a regular basis, what happens is your nervous system becomes sensitized and overactive, where it's continuing to engage your fight or flight response unnecessarily. All of this adrenaline and stress hormones causes you to experience waves of anxiety, panic attacks, heart palpitations, head fog, and many other bizarre and intense sensations. All right, to recap, What I just explained is that your anxiety is being caused by a natural, protective bodily response. Your body is engaging its defense system, the fight or flight response, and that is what's creating all these sensations and symptoms that you're experiencing. But since your anxiety and its sensations are being caused by your body's defense system, what that means is that anxiety is not harmful. In fact, it's just the opposite. Your anxiety is actually a sign of your body being in an ultra protective and safe state. Now, understanding this changes everything. Once you realize that your anxiety is not harmful, it becomes clear that resisting against anxiety is the entirely wrong approach. See, here's what happens. When you resist and tense up, you are actually sending a signal to your brain that there is a threat or danger present. And when your brain gets that signal, what it does is it releases even more adrenaline and stress hormones into your body trying to protect you. It thinks that you need to fight a threat or flee to safety, but that only worsens your anxiety symptoms. Here's how I like to break it down. Number 1, you experience anxiety. Number 2, you resist and fight against it. Number 3, the resistance signals to your brain that you're in danger. Number 4, your body believes that it needs to protect you, and it releases even more adrenaline and stress hormones. And number 5, you experience more anxiety. This is a vicious cycle that I call the anxiety trap. And the reason I call it the anxiety trap is because it is what keeps you trapped with anxiety. It is this fearful and resistance against anxiety that keeps you trapped with anxiety perpetually. This means that you have to stop resisting against anxiety. Remember, anxiety is not harmful. It is not some villain out to get you, so you don't need to protect yourself. But if you're not going to resist against anxiety, then what are you going to do? Well, this is where you hear people talking about acceptance. The concept of acceptance began with Dr. Claire Weekes, who was a pioneer of anxiety recovery starting back in the 1950s. She presented the idea that you should accept anxiety by acknowledging its presence without reacting to it. At the time, this concept was groundbreaking in the field of anxiety. But here's the thing. I am not an advocate of simple acceptance. The problem with acceptance is that it often gets confused with an action step. What happens is that you find yourself trying to use acceptance as some sort of strategy or tactic to combat your anxious feelings. I've had countless conversations with anxiety sufferers on this topic, and what they say, as well as what I thought when I tried accepting anxiety, was that you're trying to accept anxiety with the hopes that it's going to go away. What happens is you actually think that to yourself. You start to feel anxious and you tell yourself, all right, if I start accepting, maybe the anxiety will go away and leave me alone. But that doesn't work. In fact, it completely defeats the entire concept of acceptance if you desperately want to get rid of it. So no, I don't want you to try to accept anxiety. Instead, you are going to take it a big step further. You are going to surrender to your anxiety. Surrendering to anxiety is step number 2 of the fearless approach that I teach. What you're going to do is you're going to wave the white flag. You're going to drop all the resistance and simply let anxiety be present with you. When you surrender, it can no longer be confused with an action step. Instead, you are letting go of resistance at the deepest level possible. When you do this, you create a place of peaceful coexistence where you are allowing your body to do what it does naturally. So, if anxiety makes your heart race, you welcome it. If anxiety makes you lightheaded, you embrace it. And if anxiety sends nervous energy throughout your entire body, you let those sensations do whatever they want. You are completely surrendering, and that is the key. That's how you experience anxiety in the right way, and it's how you lose your fear of it. It's a huge part of how you fully recover from anxiety. Okay, I know surrendering to anxiety can sound a bit scary. That's how you experience anxiety in the right way and how you lose your fear of it. It's a really big component in the recovery process. Okay, I know that this can sound a bit scary, but I do not want you to be afraid of surrendering to your anxiety. Remember, you can surrender because there's no actual enemy here. Anxiety is not some outside force fighting against you. It's your body's very own protective mechanism at work. I do want to make one thing very clear though. Surrendering to your anxiety isn't going to make you feel instantly better. In fact, I don't want you to expect any changes in your anxiety as you first begin to surrender. Instead, surrendering is going to allow you to slow down, to stop resisting, and to begin to see anxiety for what it is, which is natural bodily sensations and nothing more. From there, you are going to lose your fear of these sensations, and that will allow your nervous system the time it needs to calm down and desensitize. All right, surrendering to anxiety is a very important part of recovery, but it is only one part of the system. You need to have an entire system and framework in place if you're going to reach a full recovery. And that's why I've put the link below. So make sure you download that before you leave. Lastly, please hit the like button as it helps other people find this episode. All right, I hope you have a good day, and I'll see you on the next episode.